Man, this is Deion Dawkins, man, and you're listening to The Scoop on OwlScoop.com. You already know.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to The Scoop, OwlScoop.com's podcast, Season 9, Episode 39. I'm OwlScoop.com editor John DeCarlo. We've got a full house today. We have Kyle Gauss, Johnny Zawizlak, Rymir Vaughn, and Declan Landis. Really excited. We have a packed episode for you guys. We'll play part of my interview with Steve Settle in our Getting to Know the Owls series. Steve was the next player we talked to. Again, a reminder that if you are an OwlScoop.com subscriber, you can get access to the full interview. So we'll play maybe like the first 10 minutes of that conversation with Steve. Talked to Andrew Hope, Philadelphia-based attorney, who talked to us about the latest NCAA settlement between the House versus the NCAA, which will now effectively allow schools to directly pay their student athletes. What does that mean? What does that look like? What does that mean for a school like Temple? We'll have all that for you. Andrew helps bring some context to that. Got a pretty full mailbag to get to. And then, of course, our Scoop Summer Madness food bracket, but Kyle just wants to call it the Summer Madness food bracket.
No.
You want that
Summertime
Madness.
It's Lana Del Rey, Summertime Sadness. We're just calling it Summertime Madness. This isn't that hard.
You were asking too much there, Kyle. I mean, we were asking too much.
I mean, Declan, are you going to sing it or no? Because I feel like every week Kyle's daring you to sing it. Kyle, will you sing it?
No, I shan't.
Johnny, learn the words for next week, and then you got it.
It's not an obscure song.
No, I know it's not.
It's not, but we've had this conversation where Johnny was like, I've never heard this song, which is blatantly false. But I think if he really like drills it, he could get the words by next week.
It's such a big song. It's referenced in another big song. Do you remember Let Me Take a Selfie, Johnny?
Maybe.
Clearly you weren't in Xfinity Live in like 2012, 2013. When Let Me Take a Selfie came out, there's a line in Let Me Take a Selfie saying, why is the DJ playing Summertime Sadness?
Oh, yes. Okay, I got you.
I really wish Johnny had
no clue.
Xfinity Live.
He's just trying to move on.
Never heard that. I got a 5 on the AP exam because I used that. So I love that song. Great reference.
Sick brag there.
Wait, which AP exam could you use?
AP Human Geography. We'll talk
Let
later.
me take a selfie.
We'll talk later. I got a 5, bro. I don't know what you mean. I got a 5. It was awesome.
There's no way human geography translated to college credits.
It was
There's
something
no
about,
way.
It was something about slang in popular culture and like the trends of the population becoming.
Was that the
younger or something.
Chainsmokers? Who
Remember.
did Let Me Take a Selfie?
That was the Chainsmokers, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Look at that.
Great song. We should make that the theme song.
No.
Yeah. I'm gonna go back and retcon out our intro for other.
We should talk to the sleazy Adams.
Might as well.
How they doled out AP credits. The Scoop, as always, is brought to you by Greenspan and Greenspan Injury Lawyers. If you've been injured while on the road or the highway and the crash was someone else's fault, the insurance company is not going to be on your side. You need us, Temple Law grads, who will fight hard to get the compensation that you deserve. We only get paid if we win. So in Pennsylvania or New York, call us today at 215-261-7359. That's 215-261-7359. And you can find them on the web at greenspans-law.com. Again, that's greenspans-law.com. Mike is a Temple grad, big Temple sports fan. He'll take care of you. So good person to reach out to. Again, thankful for his continued support of The Scoop at OwlScoop.com. Guys, since we have so much to get to, we'll try to get through the famous number 39s and on or around this date quicker, but I don't want to rush greatness with that on the on or around this date. Famous number 39s.
I actually did research on this. So I got 2 groups. I know you want to cut this short. First segment, I'll give hints. Arguably the biggest, not miss, but guy they pushed out too early in the process.
Jeremy Grant.
My next section is I'm going to name a bunch of early to mid 2000s running backs. I'll tell you their team and the college they came from. All these guys wore 39.
Oh, we need Caden.
I love it.
True.
New England and Minnesota. First round pick.
What college?
Heck out of
Minnesota is the college.
Oh.
Sorry.
Is
New
it
England?
Lawrence Mahoney?
Lawrence Maroney. Very close.
Oh,
I'll give you
Maroney.
points for that. Also New England, but possibly San Diego and Chadron State. Danny Woodhead.
Ah.
Oh,
This one's going to be really obvious, I think. Rams and Oregon State.
Steven
Yes.
Jackson.
Steven Jackson. And I have one more, I think. Oh yeah, and then Micah Fitzpatrick, but he's not ready. Yeah, I did research that.
Also, Sixers legend, Dwight Howard.
Oh yeah, he wore 39 towards the end.
Yep.
That's famous 39s. What about on this date?
Yeah.
Well, Kyle, thank you so much for asking. Welcome back to On and Around This Date. Unfortunately, I had no idea when this episode was coming out, so we decided to go with May.
Real quick. We scheduled this days ago. You just
No, but I
ignored
mean-
you just ignored the text for a while.
Okay, but you didn't hear what I said. When it's coming out,
Tomorrow.
so I assumed it was tomorrow, as
Right.
in May 30th, which is what I prepared.
Did
for.
you assume it was tomorrow based upon years of it coming out the day after we record it?
Well, I didn't know if we were going to try and push it out.
May 30th will be my 9-year wedding anniversary with Chelsea. So this podcast will be my gift to her.
My 10-year
That,
my
That's a
10-year
shitty
anniversary of
gift.
getting engaged then.
Yeah.
I'd be pissed off.
And also let me
Chelsea.
the day after, May 31st, will be 10-year anniversary of Lou Katz's death. 10 years flown by.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. So this is a special John's anniversary edition of On and Around This Date. We'll start as always with famous birthdays. We only got one today. On this day in 1974, let me try and speak actually. This famous American singer, rapper, and songwriter was born. I would say he's most popular for driving around town with the girl he loves and saying "Forget You." Ooh, ooh, ooh.
CeeLo Green.
CeeLo Green.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
And a little bit of a throwback on this one. On this day in 1431,
Good year. Good vintage.
this famous person who we've actually brought up on a couple of recent episodes was burned at the stake, having led the French army over England in the 100 Years' War.
So Joan of Arc, but I think we used her like 3 episodes ago, right?
yeah, we did.
Yeah.
On this day in 1911, the first edition of this famous automobile race was won by Ray Haroon in about 6 hours and 42 minutes.
Indy 500.
The Indy 500.
I've been to the Indy 500 2-3 times. It's a spectacle.
Yeah, I wish I could go. I just haven't, but it would be fun.
I covered the Indy 500 time trials in 2000. There was a driver from Vineland, New Jersey named Jarrett Schrader who went. So
We're like, Jared,
you're going.
how did you go fast? And it's like,
No, Jared was
yeah.
awesome.
Accelerated.
was your favorite?
I told him I got to sit in because he qualified on the last day. So it was like 3 or 4 days of being there with him and learning. He was awesome.
Did you get to interview his car? You're like, let's talk to the real star of the show.
Indy 500 is wonderful, though.
He
One of
only
the best
speaks in
races of all
neutral.
time. Right after the Monster Mile. On this day in 1922, our last one, this famous, I
Wait.
guess you'd call it memorial,
What year?
1922,
Okay.
honoring a former president, was dedicated in Washington, D.C., and also honoring, quote, the virtues of tolerance, honesty, and constancy in the human spirit.
Lincoln Memorial.
Memorial.
The Lincoln Memorial.
Second week in a row, we've referenced Abe Lincoln. We have a lot of repeat appearances.
Makes me question.
Okay, this
makes
is
me question how
not.
much steam you have for this.
Hey, I hate to break it to you. Lincoln was not at the Lincoln Memorial dedication. Okay, it's called the
did-
Lincoln Memorial for a reason.
No,
All
I'm
right?
just
He
saying,
didn't
like
show
last
up.
week, we talked about Abe Lincoln being a wrestler and them not having properly diagnosed, what was it? What did he have, Kyle?
Marfan syndrome.
Yes.
Lincoln Memorial, scene of arguably the most famous movie scene of all time. We're
Wedding-
just not
Wedding
that
Crashers?
Yeah,
Night at the Museum, Battle
we're
for the
not,
Smithsonian.
we're not that young.
You're not.
Yeah.
Wait,
So
that
not Night at the Museum.
No, it's Wedding Crashers. It's
Wedding Crashers.
it's like after their initial like montage of crashing weddings, they're just like drinking champagne outside the Lincoln Memorial, and Owen Wilson's starting to think, I don't know if I'm coming back next year. And then
Wow,
comes back anyway.
Yeah.
electric.
Yeah.
And that was on this day.
As you say that each week, there's a slight hint of a British accent at the end of it.
Die.
Just get ready for next week.
Ooh.
That was on this day, love. It's time for on this day, isn't it?
Have you ever dabbled with Cockney rhyming?
I can't say I have.
No.
It's a way of like British like rhyming where if they want to say like up the stairs, they'll say apples and pears. Like they take like the last word and then they rhyme it and then they put it in like a phrase. It's an annoying thing
Yeah,
that
that's really
we try
obnoxious.
to distance ourselves from as Americans. But here we are. That Sunday roasts and beans on toast are the things that we try to distance ourselves most from our founders.
Good move.
We're always learning every week. Always learning. Like I said at the outset of the show, if you are an OwlScoop.com subscriber, you have access to my full conversation with Steve Settle. Again, the interview I did with him was the latest in our Getting to Know the Owls series. One of the cool things he talked to me about was just taking me inside and taking listeners inside what clicked for them in those 5 games where they got blown out by UAB at home on the same night that the U.S. integrity reports start coming out. So on the court, off the court, they're dealing with a lot, and their season could have just came to an abrupt end really, really quickly. Instead, they reel off 5 straight wins. They get to the conference championship game, of course, lose to UAB again. But took me inside that, talked about how he's gotten better as a player, why he decided to come back to Temple. Even as a grad transfer, he has options. He talked about why he decided to come back. So again, just the first 10 minutes or so of our conversation. You can get the whole interview if you're an OwlScoop.com subscriber. So we'll play this portion of the interview and then have more for you on the other side. In the era of the transfer portal, every player has options every year. You decided to stay. Why did you had a pretty good year. You have your undergraduate degree from one of the best schools in America in Howard. You went to the tournament there. You put in a good season last year. You probably could have tested the transfer portal waters. Why did you decide to stay at Temple?
I think when I got in the portal last year, I was really looking for the right situation. Not so much all the other things that come with going in the transfer portal, but really just looking for opportunity to play under another great coach who's going to give me the opportunity to showcase my skills on a higher level. So coming in with Coach Fisher, I believe in what he was doing from day one. So I knew that staying here in this environment, playing in front of these fans, was something that I definitely wanted to do again, especially after the success that we ended the season with. So, I know coming in with another year or a year already under my belt in his system, a year in the American Conference, and another year with these resources is only going to make me that much better rather than leaving and having to learn a whole new system for 1 year. It just didn't make much sense to me.
We talked around this time, we were talking about this just before we started recording. It was right around this time last year when you committed. You were just graduating from Howard and getting ready to come to Temple. Tell me about the Steve Settle from a year ago and the Steve Settle that you are now. What's changed? How have you grown, like on the court, off the court?
I think the biggest thing is just my maturity on the court and off the court. I think I was pretty mature last year, but coming into this year, really having to take a leadership role and trying to lead guys as well as adjusting to like I said, a new conference, a new system. It was something that was very challenging for me, I'll admit, but it made me that much of a better player. I had to develop a whole new facet of my game, and especially in the system that Coach Fish likes to run. So I had to develop over the course of the year, which is something that, it was very challenging for me, but in the end, it all worked out for me.
So back on March 7th, you guys lose 100-72 to UAB. You guys were out rebounded 41-19. Then that report comes out that U.S. Integrity had been monitoring Temple games for unusual betting activity. So on the court and off the court, I have to imagine that was a tough time for you guys. And it's a juncture of the season where I think things obviously could have gone one way or another for you guys. You had the one last regular season game at UTSA. Instead, you guys win 5 in a row, get to the conference championship game, come 1 game away from going to the NCAA tournament. What changed in that moment for you guys? Because it could have, like I said, it could have gone south quickly and gotten ugly, and instead went in the total opposite direction for you guys.
Yeah, well, it was a very tough time. You lose a game like that, and it hurts. And then the reports come out, and you see things on social media, and it makes it that much more difficult. But yeah, I think in that moment we just bonded together. I think Coach Fish really preached connection all season, so we were already really connected. But in that moment, regardless of what happened, we needed to be connected anyway to do what we did. And I think everything that happened just made us bond together, made us trust each other, and it made us just fight no matter what. And we played with a chip on our shoulder in that tournament, and we really came together and really just bought in 100% to what Coach Fish was telling us. And I think that's what kind of propelled us through those 5 games.
Is that hard to do in 2024? Because, like you said, there's a lot of social media noise, and it's you guys don't stand as much of a chance to, you can say like, well, I'm not going to read the papers, I'm not going to read stuff, I'm not going to be on social media, but like, you're human beings. And then when a coach keeps saying, stay patient, stay patient.
Yep.
Again, we're all human beings. It's hard to stay patient. How did you guys pull that off?
It was tough. But I think it all came down to the work that we were putting in through the season. We had a tough 10-game losing streak, but the way we approached each practice, each game during that time didn't change. A lot of people talk about the losing streak, but we had people in and out of the lineup. We had injuries. We had little stuff here and there that kind of didn't allow us to get our rhythm, but we still approached practice, games the same way. So you keep that same mindset, and Coach Fish made sure we were coming in with a positive mindset. So we always believed through all the negativity that was going on throughout the whole season. And I think when you approach it like that, good things happen for you. Like I always say, it can't rain forever. So
Yeah.
luckily for us, it changed at the right time, and we just kept believing. And I think all the work that we put in throughout the year, it came to fruition at the right time.
And for you personally, the back-to-back 14-point games and the wins over SMU and Charlotte, you're really good. I don't think they win without you playing the way you play. You had 5 blocks in the SMU game. That really affected things at that end of the floor, and you went 4 for 7 from 3 in those 2 games. What was working well for you in that pivotal stretch for you guys?
I think me just trusting the work I put in. I think I had 3 pretty rough games before those 2 games, UAB, and then we played UTSA twice where I didn't really play that much or that well. But, yeah, just continue to trust. Coach Fish is going to always put his trust in me. So it really just comes down to me believing in myself. And I think those few games in the tournament, that's when things really started to click for me, and all the work that I began to put in towards the end of the season, throughout the whole season, kind of came up.
You've been to the NCAA tournament before. You want to get back there. You want to win games in the tournament. But we've talked in the past about like how your career has progressed steadily. You were on a loaded DeMatha team.
Yep.
Not everybody was focused in on you at first. For a guy who's really had to earn his way in this game, when you're named to the all-tournament team for the American Athletic Conference tournament, does that, I know that the season ended, you guys wanted to get to the tournament, but when you take stock of things, do you get to take a step back and look at that and say, I made the all-tournament team? Like do you get a chance to appreciate that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you kind of have to, and that's something that I've tried to do, over the past year. I remember I talked to you last year, and I was talking about appreciating all the little accomplishments that come along, with playing. And like you said, I haven't always been that, top guy or the guy that got all the attention. So to get recognition, it's a tribute to the work that I put in, but it's also motivation to want more, and to also know that, I still have a lot to show, a lot to prove. And, these are good accomplishments. I'm appreciative for it, but also have a lot of work to do.
The UAB team that you guys lost to right before that stretch, obviously the same team that ended your season. I know college basketball is different now. Their roster probably isn't going to look exactly the same as it did, just same for you guys. But with the way they kind of had your number, when you guys are working out in the offseason, and I don't know if this stuff is kind of overblown up, but do you kind of look at them and say, that's what we want to get to? We owe them. Like, do you kind of look at that program and say, does that motivate you at all in the offseason?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, anytime a team ends your season, you got to take note of that. Any team that really beats you bad, I always take note of it, and I always try to, return the favor. So, yeah, UAB beat us bad the first time, and then they ended our season in the championship. We had a chance to go to the NCAA tournament, and we had to get through them, and we fell a little bit short. So definitely coming into next year, we know that that's another team that's probably going to be really good. I'm not sure the details of their roster, but if I had to assume, we're probably going to have to get through them again. And it's definitely something that's in the back of your mind. So definitely adds a little extra motivation for sure.
Obviously, losing hurts any way you slice it. But for you, you had just been to the tournament the year before, and just that the whole Howard community had taken just so much pride in that. I think it was since 1992 they had been in the tournament, right? And you guys had a lot of coverage, Kamala Harris coming in and talking to you guys. Not every day the vice president of the United States comes in and talks to you. You had just seen that. And then all of a sudden you're a game away from it, and you guys lose. did it sting a little bit more for you just knowing like I know what that feels like and I want those guys to feel that?
Yeah, I mean, that was probably the toughest loss in my career. I remember we were losing, and it wasn't really a chance for us to get back in the game. We had one final huddle, and I could just feel all the emotions of the run being over. The new age and the transfer portal. You don't know what guys are thinking, but it's a possibility that probably this team wasn't going to be able to run it back, especially with Sam leaving and not having any eligibility left. But it was tough, man. Especially being there the year before. We had a tough year, but we preached, all you have to do is get hot at the right time. Everyone makes a tournament. You handle your business in the tournament, and no matter what happened in the regular season, you start 0-0 in that first round. So we handled our business up into the championship game, and we fell a little bit short. It was a tough matchup for us, and you want it so bad for everybody, and just everything that comes along with making the NCAA tournament. You want people to experience that, but like I said, that's got to add fuel to our fire coming in June.
Before we get into some of the other stuff about your game, you blocked 30 shots again, same as the season before Howard, and then you set career highs in steals with 50 and a career best mark with just 35 turnovers. Do you take pride in that stuff as much as hitting shots?
Yeah, I think defensively is where I need to hang my hat in order for me to get to where I'm trying to go, and also to give our team the best chance. I know, I can hit shots. I'm developing that shot creation ability. But defensively is something that whether I'm 4 for 18 or whether I'm 4 for 4, like defensively it always needs to be at my standard. So I took pride in that end, and that's something that I want to expand upon. And I think, like I said, that'll give us the best opportunity to win, to always have defensive presence and energy.
What are you working on this summer? What are the next steps that you want to develop in your game?
I think for me, coming into my last year, it's just really taking pride in being a leader, really taking pride in showing guys the ropes, and just being that older guy, that older mature guy that's been through it all. I've been through great seasons, 20-win seasons, and not so good seasons. And I just want to make sure that I leave my mark on this program, especially only being here for 2 years, and really just want to leave the last season to be my best season.
So a big thank you once again to Steve. Always great talking to him. If you subscribe to OwlScoop, you get access to the full interview. What he also talks about in my entire conversation with him, among other things, goes right down the line with the players on the roster, talked in detail about the 3 newcomers, what he's seen from Linger the third, or the 4 newcomers, I should say. Linger the third, Jamal Mashburn Jr., Elijah Gray, and Jameel Brown. So just a lot of great insight into the roster. The 2 incoming freshmen as well, Nathan Tobias and Dylan Batee. So again, just a reminder, great time to subscribe to OwlScoop.com, get access to that full interview. Another, of course, a big thing in the world of college athletics, as you guys all know by now, the NCAA and the Power 5 conferences agreed last week to settle a pending lawsuit, the House versus NCAA, which will now allow schools to directly pay student athletes. So to help make sense of this and bring some context to what this means for a program like Temple, talk to Andrew Hope, Philadelphia-based attorney with Buchanan, Ingersoll, and Rooney, who has studied this, written about it. As I mentioned at the outset of the show, we had him on the pod back in late February for an NIL explainer, and we wanted to bring him back to bring more context and understanding with all of this. Gave me some really interesting stuff that I think you'll all want to hear, especially for those of you who think that this is all kind of, doom and gloom for a program like Temple. Andrew doesn't necessarily feel that will be the case. So give this a listen, and then we'll be back with more to close things out with the mailbag and the seedings for our Summer Madness food bracket. Kyle, there you go. Not scoops.
No. Summertime madness. I'm going to
Summertime
tattoo this
madness.
on your
We've
hand.
got that.
I know.
God damn it, Don.
We've got that summertime madness.
It's
Fall
not hard. I'm just blast the music in your ear.
Anyway, let's play this interview with Andrew, learn a lot more about what this latest settlement, what this latest development means. Then we'll have more for you on the other side with Summertime Madness in the mailbag. Is that better?
It's not great, but yeah, sure, it's better.
Hey. All right, let's hear from Andrew, and then we'll have more for you on the other side. Well, if you're a loyal listener of The Scoop, you will remember that Andrew Hope, a Philadelphia lawyer from Buchanan, Ingersoll, and Rooney, who has written about NIL and studied it, joined us as a guest on the pod back in late February on episode 26 to provide a great and thorough NIL explainer that I know a lot of our listeners really appreciated. And he's back with us today because we have yet another important legal development in the world of college athletics, and he's been kind enough to join us so he can bring some context and some real understanding to all this. Andrew, how you doing? Thanks for being with us today. Appreciate it.
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me back.
Problem. Andrew, in that episode, among other things, I think we kind of kept coming back to we talked a lot, I should say, about what the NCAA could have done differently. If it could go back in time, we talked about having an established revenue sharing model that would have and could have made sense instead of them just trying to kick the can down the road and trying to do everything, through the courts and with legislation. And so here we are now today in late May. There's a revenue sharing model, but it's coming. And again, as I say on any of this, feel free to correct me, but it's coming is part of a settlement between the NCAA and the Power Five conferences in the House versus NCAA case. And I guess had this gone to trial, it could have cost both organizations as much as more than $4 million in treble damages. And I'm sure Andrew can better explain treble damages in a minute better than I could. So instead, all those parties have settled on $2.8 billion in damages to former college athletes and as much as 22% of the average Power Five school's revenues. So among other things here, scholarship caps are no longer a thing, and that will allow athletic departments to spend more there. And then if you're sitting here and you're listening, you're wondering, of that 2.8 billion, who's paying what? So the NCAA is paying $1.1 billion. The Power Five are paying $1.65 billion. And then the remaining 27 D1 conferences are paying $990 million, which would be an average of around $37 million per conference. I don't know if that is kind of, skewed, or if there are certain other conferences in the group of five that are paying more. But, among other things, Andrew, I think you and I can agree that, look, we have some specific financial details here that essentially got both sides of this out of more hot water for now. This seems to be rife with imperfections. And before we even get into what's not settled, and that's the uncertainty around the oversight of collectives and other third parties, as you mentioned to me. What's your just general overview of this? What does this mean going forward for now, I should say?
So there was a sense of inevitability here. The NCAA was going to lose because the NCAA always loses. And the difference here is there was a $4 billion potential recovery for the plaintiffs, and that was settled for $2.8 billion. And then, rather than having that all payable at once, the NCAA gets to structure that settlement over 10 years. So it is kind of win-win. There is an element of control. And then obviously you save, a portion of legal fees as well. The plaintiffs are represented by two, main attorneys, Jeffrey Kessler, who is really just a giant in the world of sports law. He is the head of the antitrust group at Winston & Strawn, which is a Chicago-based firm, but he's in their New York office. Prior to that, he was at Weill Gottschall. He's represented the NFLPA, Major League Baseball, NBA players as well. He's a frequent lecturer at Columbia Law School. I saw him speak there while I was there. He teaches actually complex litigation in addition to lecturing on sports law. So he was sort of the giant in the room, and the plaintiffs were also represented by a gentleman named Steve Berman, who is a class action attorney based in Seattle. It's a smaller firm, but he kind of achieved some notoriety representing plaintiffs in class actions against tobacco companies in the 1990s, and then has pursued class action in the climate change arena against oil companies. He also handled claims against Volkswagen with regard to the emissions scandal that they had a couple years back. And so these two guys, represented the classes of plaintiffs here, and it is the House decision, but the litigation has been consolidated. So it's House, Hubbard, and Carter. There are three class action cases that were all consolidated before Judge Claudia Wilkin in the federal court for the Northern District of California, which is where most of this action takes place. So House is the big one. That's the Power Five football, men's basketball plaintiffs, women's basketball, and additional kind of D1 athletes. So the main corpus of potential damages here flows to men's football and football and men's basketball for their NIL, for broadcast, but then also video games and third-party NIL rights. The Hubbard case dealt with kind of back pay for Alston payments, and those are those education related financial awards. And then Carter was the revenue sharing case. Now, there's also this case pending in the District of Colorado, the Fontenot case, which is technically still alive. It was not consolidated with these actions, and will only continue, I believe, if plaintiffs in these consolidated actions opt out of the class, which seems unlikely, but it's certainly possible. So, there are two components to the settlement. There's the $2.8 billion, John, that you mentioned, and that's back pay. That's for all the damages that would have accrued. But then there's also the revenue sharing portion, and that's forward looking. So, I think we're still kind of sifting through what the settlement looks like. And there are potential complications, both with respect to small schools and large schools, with respect to Title IX, with respect to the oversight of third-party NIL collectives. So there are still a lot of kind of legal issues, and I think Steve Berman said something like, "This ends the litigation," and it just doesn't. There's clearly more issues here that will be litigated, but it certainly is the most kind of holistic approach to this issue, which is a departure from the kind of whack-a-mole approach that the NCAA has adopted in the past. So in that sense, it's a step forward.
So the Power Five conferences were named as the parties in the case, so they were the only ones involved in the negotiations. But then it seems like the rest of the other leagues are on the hook for it. And Tim Wistrick, he's the commissioner of the Big Sky Conference. He's been pretty outspoken about this, non-Power Five commissioner, and he's saying that's not fair because he's pointed out that some of the FCS schools, or maybe all of them, are going to help pay for this, but only the Power Five schools were involved in the negotiations, and he feels like that's unfair. Is that just a massive obvious statement? Is he right there, or is it more complex than that?
So, slight clarification there. The NCAA itself was also a defendant. And so it was negotiating on behalf of its member institutions, in addition to the conferences themselves, right? The NCAA, the way that this settlement is actually going to work is the NCAA makes distributions on an annual basis to all its member institutions. But then, the conferences are also free to kind of negotiate their own, broadcast deals and have their own streams of revenue. So that is the interplay here. And so, again, there are a couple of ways to look at this. There's the back pay portion, the $2.8 billion, where the NCAA is covering not the majority of it, but a plurality of it. And a lot of it is being paid out of insurance money and the NCAA reserve fund. And then the rest actually comes in withheld distribution. So again, yes, member institutions are going to be paying for it. But they're not necessarily writing checks. What they're going to see is a decrease in the amount of distributions going forward over this 10-year period. At the same time, there is, this belief that, the revenue stream will now increase, or has already increased over this period as new TV deals are negotiated. So there is always an element of kind of unfairness, right? You could say that from both sides, just because of the scale of the issues. And the amount of money involved. So you can look at it from the perspective of the individual athletes, and you can look at it from the perspective of the individual schools. You're going to have smaller schools. You're going to have athletes in non-revenue sports who are going to feel, I think, at the end of the day, perhaps a bit shortchanged.
Mm-hmm. And then so it's capped at like 22% of any athletic department's overall budget or the revenue. And just to be clear, how the schools share the revenues it's at the discretion of each school, correct?
So this is the revenue sharing portion of it. And so what I believe happened, and again, we're still kind of operating with incomplete information here. It's 22% of $100 million, which is the average revenue for each of the Power Five schools. Yeah. So some schools like Ohio State and Texas have gigantic revenues, over $200 million per year. And some schools have lower amounts than that, even though they're in Power Five conferences. So, for example, this $22 million a year, that's like 8%, let's say, of Ohio State's budget, and it's
22 million. I think I said 22%. My apologies.
yeah. Oh no, that is right. It's the 22% of like the average of $100 million, right?
Okay.
That's how they got to that, to that number. And then the other kind of portion of this, typically in a collective bargaining situation, professional sports, it's about 50-50 split. So the rest of it is made up with the additional college scholarships. You mentioned essentially the scholarship caps are being removed. And that's the easy way for schools to comply, right? It's not money coming out of their pocket necessarily. So between the increased scholarship money and this portion of the revenue sharing, that's how you get, potentially to this mythical 50% number, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And then there are some people who are saying the Title IX piece of this is just something else that's going to end up in court. This is nowhere near done or settled. Would you agree with that one too?
I would be shocked if it didn't. And there are a couple of ways to go about trying to comply or shoehorn this settlement into, technically sort of, something, kind of implement the settlement in a way that complies. So I think, first of all, there's just no way, I don't think, that this money is going to be distributed equally across sports. A disproportionate amount of it, will, and frankly probably should, go to, football players and basketball players who are driving the revenue. These programs at a lot of schools basically fund the entire athletics department. Mm-hmm. And so these are the people who are generating this revenue. And guess what? Even if you tried to do a wholly equal distribution, these people would sue. So I think you're looking at litigation any way you slice it. But I think, the driver here, I believe that the numbers that I saw, in connection with the House litigation, the plaintiffs submitted some sort of economic analysis or economic report that estimated that 90% of the damages flowed from men's college basketball and college football. Mm-hmm. And so does that mean that 90 cents on the dollar, from the revenue sharing is going to go to those athletes? Probably not. But, I think a larger portion of it is going to find its way into their pockets than it will, the water polo team. Right. And so that's one aspect of it. But, typically speaking, women's college sports, and you saw a sharp uptick in women's college, in the interest of women's college basketball this postseason. And so you're starting to see some traction there. And I think that's fantastic. But the economic fact remains that it is just not on the same level as, the traditional revenue sports. And so the question is whether and to what extent Title IX requires an actual equal amount of, funds distributed from this revenue sharing model. And so one approach to it would be to kind of take it outside of, payment from the NCAA, essentially, filter this money through third-party NIL. And then, the other portion of it is, well, does it have to be dollar for dollar? Could you get a blessing from Congress in the sense of a comprehensive NIL statute, which is what the NCAA has sought for decades now? Not necessarily with respect to NIL, that's more recent, but if you have a statutory scheme from the federal government that, for example, says, the NCAA gets a limited antitrust exemption, which it will probably need in order to implement, the mechanism by which it intends to oversee the revenue sharing model and its regulation of third-party collectives. But then it also just a blessing that, hey, this also complies with Title IX requirements for these reasons. You could probably get a statute that says that. The question is, whether or not that will happen. It hasn't happened yet. No bill has ever made it out of committee onto the floor, although now it does seem like there is probably a little bit more momentum to act in Congress. So we'll see about that. But, short of that or in advance of that, I would fully expect additional litigation in this area.
And so that, I guess, for people listening to this podcast, Temple fans, Temple's in a G5 conference in the American. Temple is one of, we've talked about this before. And I say handful, that's probably too vague. Probably much more than less than half of the athletic departments out there are running at a budget surplus. A lot of them are running at a budget deficit, including Temple's. And I'm not trying to single them out for that. What does this mean for a school like Temple, when it comes to redistributing some revenue and trying to pay athletes, are they literally only paying what they can afford to pay?
It's a good question, and I can't pretend to understand the inner workings of the finances of athletic departments and where that money comes from and how much of that is actually cash flow as opposed to, let's say, book value. Let's say college scholarships are worth X amount. I don't know what that means for the operations of a university. I just don't have that insight.
Yeah.
But yes, it would seem like, this is, I don't think it makes things any worse, right? There were always the haves and the have-nots. There's always been kind of an arms race, whether it's, the basketball player only dorms at Kentucky, or, the less sort of, sanctioned kind of more under the table stuff that goes on in some of these schools. If anything, I think you could make the argument that this is an attempt to kind of level the playing field, particularly to the extent that there is kind of a cap. There's like a salary, a cap that you can spend, but then also you have the potential to kind of reach out to third-party collectives to participate in this model in a way that potentially defrays some of the costs from the university itself. All this is sort of academic at this point. I haven't read the settlement. I don't think that it's public yet. I believe it's still kind of a term sheet that needs to be approved by the court before it is actually implemented. And beyond that, I don't know. It's just a term sheet. It's not a final settlement. And then beyond that, I don't know that anyone necessarily understands the exact language that's in there and how it will work.
And you referenced this, another important piece of this you've referenced a few times, and you can look at a lot of different articles online. This does not mean the end of collectives. And that's another area that is sort of vague, for lack of a better term, right? It doesn't really address, as far as we know, collectives can keep existing and raising money moving forward, right?
So that's, to me, the most encouraging portion of this settlement is this idea that I always believed that there was a place for collectives, absolutely. But there ought to be a kind of a win-win approach to this sense of, the university, exercising some oversight, but also, kind of working hand in hand to kind of raise money and to get money to the athletes. I fully support that as a kind of, a cooperative approach to compliance. And so I think this is a step in the right direction. I haven't seen the details of this particular settlement. I do think it will be interesting to see whether and to what extent the NCAA can attempt to regulate third parties without running afoul of antitrust rules, which is why you probably need congressional action here. But some of the things that I've seen, at least discussed in the term sheet, are true NIL rules. So basically, not just like booster payments, which is what is technically allowed now, particularly given some of the other litigation that's gone on that precluded the NCAA from enforcing any of its NIL provisions. So if you remember, there was a case that was brought in the Eastern District of Tennessee by the AGs for Tennessee and Virginia, which basically won an injunction against the NCAA that basically said you can't enforce any of this stuff. Yeah. So this was happening. This idea that boosters could just pay athletes, just cash without requiring anything of them. And there is, from what I understand, a true NIL component to this settlement, which would require some sort of, endorsement deal, some sort of, this for that. So, and violating that could potentially trigger some sort of penalty. So that is, interesting, and I'll be, I'll be very eager to see how that unfolds. But yes, that this is, I still think there is a place for collectives. And I think, whether it is a way to kind of funnel money that exempts the NCAA and athletic departments from some of this, some of the kind of antitrust regulations and Title IX regulations, or whether it's, kind of codified and blessed by Congress with exemptions. I do think that the collectives will absolutely continue to play a role, and potentially even a large role going forward.
This could even be a better thing for collectives, potentially.
I think so. I mean, again, what folks seem to have wanted throughout the process, at least what I always was interested in seeing, was, predictability. what are the rules? And the rules should apply to everyone. And so I think that is a step in the right direction as far as transparency. And the NCAA has not been known for that in the past. It has essentially attempted to enforce its regulations, via threat and intimation, as opposed to kind of laying out for everyone exactly what's allowed and what's not. So yes, I think that, in the best of all possible outcomes, you're going to see a lot more sort of bright line rules as far as collectives, what's allowed, and the rules within universities.
So even locally, whether it's a Temple, whether it's a Villanova, whether it's a St. Joe's, LaSalle, I would think that now, today, as we're talking about this on May 28th, collectives, I think, probably become even more important to these athletic departments, right? Because if well, now Villanova might be in a better revenue position based on what they've done in recent NCAA tournaments. We've seen what they've been able to help build on Lancaster Avenue. But for a school like Temple, a school like LaSalle, a school like St. Joe's was able to maintain Eric Reynolds, Villanova's able to maintain through NIL Eric Dixon, and as Kyle Neptune's fighting for viability there. Collectives, I would think, become more important to them, right? To supplement money that they're not generating at a place like an Alabama or a Texas A&M, schools that were printing money already, right?
I would think so. That would certainly make sense to me. The other issue that I think bears mentioning is, how does this all relate? And you alluded to it just now. How does this all relate to the transfer rules? So I don't see those being affected. However, I do think that what's contemplated in this settlement is multi-year contracts for these athletes. Now, typically, scholarships were renewable each year at the kind of the whim of the athletic department and the university. And that was sort of one-sided for a long time, but now you have the transfer rules where students don't have to sit out and student athletes can jump from team to team. And you're seeing, unfortunately for some people, this perpetual free agency in college sports. So what you potentially have here, is the negotiation of multi-year contracts whereby, these payments are only made, over, a certain amount of time, from a certain party, with the understanding that you'll continue to kind of uphold your end as a student athlete. So that could lend a little bit more, stability to college sports, which I think everyone would sort of welcome at this point. And I think collectives could potentially play a role in that, depending on how these contracts are structured.
You're talking about, just for clarity, you're talking about collective contracts, like if a student athlete, if Joe Smith is transferring from Tennessee to, say, UVA, to your alma mater, and UVA's collective says, we will get you through various car dealerships, charitable initiatives, of $750,000 over the next 2 years. If you sign this contract, if you play basketball for Tony Bennett at the University of Virginia over the next 2 years, if you don't and you break that contract, you'll owe money back. That's what you're talking about specifically, or you're talking more about the NCAA and the school having a contract?
Yes. So really, it's both, because under NCAA rules, what you could not have under its NIL policy is what's called an inducement. You couldn't have, as a provision of the contract, only if you enroll. And in fact, that's what the litigation in Tennessee was about. This idea that high school athletes and student athletes in the transfer portal couldn't negotiate NIL deals before they decided what school they were going to enroll in, because that would be an improper inducement. And so that's now gone away. So you can now structure contracts in a way that would otherwise, previously had been violative of NCAA rules under the inducement provision. And you can structure them as multi-year deals. But I believe also the revenue sharing model kind of implicates multi-year contracts for these athletes. And again, I haven't seen the details, but I've seen it discussed as, the NCAA scholarship, the college scholarships from the member institutions and the revenue sharing models that are being, discussed also implicate potential multi-year commitments, which I do think are beneficial for all sides at this point.
So it's interesting, as I hear you talk about this, I think, like, if you're at a program like a Temple like a Tulane, like someone in the American or one of the G5 programs, you hear this and you're thinking, well, this is it. This is a greater divide between the haves and the have-nots. But you listening to you talk about it, yes, the haves and the have-nots, that's something that has always been there. We get that. But you don't necessarily, if I correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm misinterpreting this, you don't maybe see it as that cut and dried as you take a bigger look at this.
I think football is its own thing at this point. I really, the last time I was on the podcast, I said I wouldn't be surprised in 5 years if there was, a semi-professional, independent, football league with, the top Power Five conferences. Not even all of them. I mean, UVA is never going to compete for a national championship in football. I don't think in my lifetime, and they're in a Power Five conference. So, there are certain schools that are just so far ahead of everyone else and are willing to kind of, to drive, to devote revenue to this particular enterprise, and made a ton of money back doing it. But I think it will be difficult to unseat them regardless. And part of it is honestly just, this is a separate issue, but the number of scholarships that are required to compete now. The fact that there are unlimited college scholarships, and essentially there are basically only roster caps. Maybe that helps. Although I don't think so, just because I think if it were me, if you wanted to make, if you wanted to make Division I college football more competitive, you would shrink the rosters. And I know that's difficult because you have the turnover, and students can only stay for potentially 5 years. But when you have all this talent stockpiled at the SEC schools, I think it just becomes very difficult, and Big Ten schools too. It becomes very difficult for non-Power 5 programs to compete at that level. So short of that, I think that is very much an uphill battle. But for the rest of the sports, where you have more manageable roster sizes, where you have a more competitive landscape, I don't think this does anything to diminish that. And if anything, I think particularly in some of the non-revenues, I'm thinking specifically about baseball, where it would be like I think it was 11 and a half scholarships that had to be divided over however many athletes, like 30 some athletes. And then you had certain schools like Vanderbilt, for example, which was private, which had a need-based aid system whereby it could game the scholarship limitations by just making sure that the scholarships found the people who would not have qualified for their need-based aid, which is incredibly generous. If anything, in these sports where you have the scholarship limits lifted, it could potentially make other schools more competitive. So I guess the long way of saying, I don't know that it makes anything worse. And and football aside, it could make some sports more competitive and make it better for some of the smaller schools.
If you were looking specifically at Temple, direct look at it, obviously Temple, it had some really good seasons under Matt Rule and Al Golden, one under Jeff Collins before NIL, before the portal. Stan Drayton has had a tough time his first couple of years. I'm assuming this makes it harder for Temple football, but doesn't change quite as much for Temple basketball.
I think that would be probably my takeaway. I think Temple is in a unique situation in that it doesn't have its own stadium on campus, which I feel like is not a small thing. Now, again, I don't know enough about recruiting at Temple, whether or not playing in an NFL stadium is actually a selling point. I could see that being the case. Temple is blessed with some really, really good football coaches over the years. And it's unfortunate, and it's difficult to kind of keep those people sort of on board. But those challenges present themselves everywhere. I mean, Temple, I feel like, has certainly outpaced a lot of other Power 5 schools over the last decade, Virginia included. I mean, I would certainly, I think, again, I just view football as its own entity at this point. It is semi-professional, and it has been for a while now. So I think, the focus on, winning a conference championship and that sort of thing, as opposed to competing in a New Year's Day Bowl is probably the most reasonable level of expectation for the vast majority of college football fans, whether they're at Temple or whether they're somewhere else. So yeah, but I think that's right. I think I do think that if you have a particularly kind of nimble and engaged set of collectives and alumni who are, interested in kind of pursuing, investment in these other sports, I think, yeah, this presents an opportunity. This settlement, depending on how it's actually implemented, could help Temple basketball for sure.
Andrew, terrific stuff as always. Thanks for bringing a lot of context and understanding to this for our listeners. Just a final question for you. What do you think is next in this whole process? I know that's kind of a tricky question to answer, but now that we have this big piece of it, as imperfect as it is, and there are some unsettled pieces of it, what's next here, and how would you kind of tie a bow on this moving forward?
Well, I think it's encouraging in the sense that these student athletes who have generated a lot of revenue for their universities are finally going to have the opportunity to share in that. And that includes typically, what's considered non-revenue athletes. My concern going forward is whether and to what extent this settlement and the changes to NCAA rules potentially affects these non-revenue programs going forward. And short of congressional action that sort of sanctions and codifies this settlement and grants the necessary exemptions under antitrust laws and potentially Title IX, I think there is a real risk of that going forward. So that's something to keep an eye on.
Well, probably have you on again at some point to talk about that if that comes down the pike. Andrew, really, really appreciate it as always, and I'll see you soon.
I appreciate it. Thanks a lot, John.
All right, so a lot of great stuff there from Andrew about just what this means for schools like Temple, what it could mean moving forward. Always brings a lot of great context and understanding to this. Something else that we want to talk about as well, something that was just released today, was news of the Owl Elite Fund. So you heard Andrew mention how collectives could become even more important now, and Temple just announced today that one former Temple student athlete and one Temple law grad have launched a for-profit collective called the Owl Elite Fund. Unlike the Tough Fund, this will be a for-profit collective run by Lou Parisi, who was on Temple's cross-country team, and Jackie Dansek, a graduate of Temple's Beasley School of Law. In the release Temple put out today, they mentioned 3 pillars. So I'm reading from the release: empowering student athletes to take control of their futures, enabling them to unlock the full potential of their NIL, and ensuring that they receive the recognition and compensation they deserve for their contributions to their respective sports and their communities. To achieve its mission, the Out Elite Fund aims to invest in resources in brand management, marketing, and promotions, develop and sponsor programs to raise proficiencies in compliance and legal and financial literacy, and spearhead community building and networking programs to create opportunities for athletes. So that'll be a good transition into the mailbag. Again, we've got some mailbag questions to get to before we close things out with our fun food talk. So the first mailbag question that we'll read to you here comes in line with this about the Owl Elite Collective. So this comes from our message board. Temple Owls alum 1620 is the screen name. Thoughts on the recently announced Owl Elite Collective, and how does this coordinate with the Tough Fund? Should we be concerned with saturating an already tough NIL market or Temple NIL market, or was this needed? All right, so I mean, as we understand it, you're going to see them pursue more corporate sponsorships to expand Temple's NIL reach. They're something that, or an entity that could and should be working in concert with the Tough Fund. So I don't think it's really saturating the market there. I think it only helps, right, Kyle?
Yeah, I would say for people that are concerned of, hey, from everything we're hearing, Temple has millions and millions of dollars in NIL to begin with. This isn't, it's not oversaturating or splitting the pools. I think it's opening up the possibility for potential revenue sources that we're not able to give money to the top.
Next question in the mailbag here comes from the screen name Temple J. When does the transfer portal close? So for football, the spring window closed April 30th. We've talked about this before, but just as a review, just in case people are hearing about this for the first time, for men's and women's basketball, the spring window closed May 1st. So, although you won't see athletes entering the portal, there are still athletes out there who haven't decided. The NCAA did also make a rule alteration last month that said grad transfers had to enter the portal by the close of the final window for their respective sports. So it's April 30th and May 1st. So obviously still people in the portal.
I think people get confused by the term close. Close does not mean that you can't transfer to a new school. Like if you're already in the portal, you have, 3.5 more months to find a school. Like for basketball, especially, you could enroll in September 10th, as long as you get in within the academic calendar.
Yeah. New England Owl, the next mailbag question. Any portal names to keep an eye on? Nothing super reputable, nothing well sourced. Hate to disappoint you there, New England now. This won't excite you as much as anything else. Kyle broke some news about a recent walk-on edition for the Temple men's basketball program. Subscribers know about that by now. A second one on the way as well. So they're getting a little creative there. Again, these are walk-ons. These aren't guys that are taking up scholarships, but we'll obviously keep an eye on that stuff. If we have anything reputable to pass along in terms of a portal big or a wing, we will let you know, but nothing that would be worth talking about right now that would go beyond speculation. Next mailbag question from the screen named The Hick. How are summer workouts going? So here's another reminder in answering the Hick's mailbag question here. I'll tell listeners again to subscribe to OwlScoop. You can listen to what Steve Settle had to say about working out this summer with players like Jameel Brown, what he's seen. Obviously, summer workouts will ramp up, but Steve had some interesting things to say about his new teammates. I think that are pretty encouraging that you'll want to hear. So that's how I would answer that question. Next question from Twitter, Off the Hook 3, Temple Tough. In an imaginary world where Stan Drayton had all of the NIL money at his disposal, like you could throw $10 million at a quarterback, do you think Temple would have a top 50 class? What would it take for Temple to recruit better? Well, you're kind of combining a lot of different worlds there. Like, what would it take for Temple to recruit better? I mean, let's say Temple had $10 million to throw at a quarterback and they got whoever. That guy's there for a year. So like, does that help your 2025 class? Well, that 2025 class is going to be asking Stan Drayton, is that quarterback going to be there when I get to campus? It is really a year to year thing.
So I guess that like his real underlying question is like, would the staff, if money was not an issue, be able to like go out there and really get guys, right? Like,
yeah, in that way. Okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah. So if I'm reading it that way, I mean, a top 50 class, especially once, Rivals has a comprehensive rankings now where it considers transfer portals as well as just like high school and JUCO commit. So if that's the case, I mean, you see schools like Memphis go out there and Memphis has like a top, I think 25-ish, 30th, maybe like when it comes to transfer things. I think they could. I think the bigger thing is you would see some guys that have left still be here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I think that's the bigger thing. Like if they had infinite money, I mean, I can point to linebackers that are going to be played in the AAC last year and going to play in the ACC next year. That would still be at Temple. Like I think there's still plenty of things like that. Like your starting right tackle wouldn't have gone to California.
Yeah. Yep.
So I think they would have a better chance at being a successful program for sure. Are they going to go out there all of a sudden and be like, hey, Will Howard entered the portal and we out recruited Ohio State for him?
Mm-hmm.
No. Like Ohio State's still Ohio State. And down west guys, they need to shine. So they go to the national spotlight. But no, I mean I honestly feel like, is this the best recruiting staff Temple's ever had? No. Is it a pretty good one? I think so. I think there's some guys on there that are legitimately good recruiters and they're able to get guys. There's some guys that are exclusively bottom line focused.
Yeah, I mean, well that's the better way of explaining it, Kyle. Like if you're answering it that way, then I mean, like there are things that have made Stan Drayton an effective recruiter in the past. I mean, when Stan Drayton recruited Bijan Robinson to Texas, he was recruiting against everybody and anybody in the world to get him. Chris Wiesahan has been an effective recruiter. Granted, they're portal guys, but it seems like a lot of guys have connected with somebody as new as Kevon Beckwith recently. I mean, they have some guys on the staff that are charismatic, connect, relate, have kind of bought into the mission and the identity of what Temple is so much better than a guy like Rod Carey did. But again, like Kyle said, if you have bottom line guys who are like, well, even just like Colin Vaughn committed to Temple over Utah State, then Utah State came up with more money. He was like, hey, doesn't mean I don't love you guys, but I got to take more money. So yes, I think that if they have more money to play with, you'd see them bring in a top 50 class. Funny that you mentioned Will Howard, Kyle, because this Will Howard on Twitter is our next _20 is the next question here. What are the best realistic and worst case scenarios for this upcoming basketball season? Best case scenario, most realistic scenario, and worst case scenario for the upcoming basketball season. I guess I'm assuming he's talking about men's, but we can go with both here, men's and women's. Johnny, hop in here.
I think best case. Am I just running through all three? Or are we going around?
Yeah, give us all three.
All three. I think best case scenario is you make everything gels together, all the transfers that you got. guys like Steve Settle maybe improve or play even better than they did last year, and you make another run in the conference tournament somehow and find a way to make it into March Madness. I think the most realistic case scenario is you see improvement. I mean, you have more talent than you did last year, I think, but I don't think you winning the conference championship is the most realistic. I think you can compete and be in the conversation for it, maybe even fight for a regular season title. And then worst case scenario is it all implodes, injuries, and you don't even win a game in the conference tournament, which I'm not saying I could see happen, but it's also Temple, so you never know.
Yeah, and I can tackle the women's side of it as well because I don't think it's that far off. I think both of these programs are almost in similar places in that the women's team also lost some key parts of their roster, rebuilt, found other people that could maybe plug in and fill some gaps in their play last year. Obviously, they won the regular season title, won one game in the conference tournament, and lost to the eventual conference champions. I think best case scenario is that they win the whole thing. I think this is a very talented team with a lot of young players that now have a little more experience under their
Like
belt.
the Natty, they win the Natty.
No, the
Oh.
conference championship.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
sorry. My fault.
Best thing, they get
In my
promoted
head,
to
I
the
was
Premier
thinking
League,
conference.
and they just keep going.
Well, I mean, technically, would that be wrong?
That is best
You
case
know?
scenario. That is
Best case scenario, they go undefeated and they become the best team of all time. I mean, that's technically true. But
It is fair.
I think the most
Step aside, Don
realistic.
Staley.
I think the most realistic, like best case scenario for this team is they win the conference championship. But I think it's going to take a lot to get there, and that's why I think the most realistic is probably the Final Four in the conference. I think they need to win games that last year they struggled to win, especially early. They kind of found their roles toward the end of the year, but in the conference tournament went away from that. But now they got some scorers coming in. They have the ability to space the floor, which they struggled with at times last year. They got a couple more shooters coming in. I think they can realistically contend for the championship. And then worst case scenario is they just can't find their roles. They can't, it seemed like a bit like probably about midway through the year before they went on that winning streak to end the season and get a share of the regular season championship. They just were struggling to find who was going to be the primary scorer, who was going to space, who could step up when. And we kept talking about that on the show. Like they needed to figure out who they were. And eventually they did, but it took a while. So I think the worst case scenario is it takes too long. They find out too late in the year. And then, you have a similar performance where it's just disappointing because they do have the talent to compete, but are they going to be able to put the pieces together?
Amir, what about you? Pick a team, men's or women's, best realistic and worst case scenario, and then we'll go over to Kyle.
Johnny and Declan hit the nail on the head with what they said. I do think it's realistic for the women to win the AAC, the AAC, the American,
not the national.
Yeah, the American Conference tournament. I think they're better than they were last year, and that's a team that probably should have beaten Rice.
Yeah,
and they were among the best teams in the conference mainly in the end, like December on. They were pretty much one of the best teams, if not the best team in the conference. And I do think that it is realistic to say that they can win the whole thing. That also being the best case scenario.
Kyle, what do you think in best, realistic, and worst case scenarios?
Yeah, I'll do the men's team. I kind of agree a lot with what Johnny said. I think best case scenario is, look, Jamal Mashburn's healthy and shows you why he's a potential all-conference level player. Len Greer III either steps into being just like a starting point guard and running the offense for him, or they have a free-flowing enough offense that it's okay that you're kind of starting two combo guards. Zion Stanford makes that next step. Steve Settle and Elijah Gray are able to kind of at least shore up, down low defense. And then things start to click and you go, okay, this is a team that won 22, 23 games and was a 3 seed going into the conference tournament and got hot and won. That's probably best case scenario. Worst case scenario is the opposite of all those things happen. Jamal Mashburn still has that hand injury, doesn't really come back from it. Len Greer kind of shows maybe, hey, there is a reason that St. Joe's kind of lean more on Xavier Brown than Len Greer in that offense. And Temple's lack of a big true center really gets exposed against teams like UAB, and Temple kind of grinds through it, and you start to question, like, okay, the makeup of this roster just didn't work out. The most realistic scenario in my mind is I think they're better than last year, which is weird to say because they technically kind of came in second in the conference, like they lost in the final. But like I don't think they're necessarily going to be there. I think they're going to be in, an 18 to 19 win, 18 to 20 regular season win team that probably doesn't win the conference championship. I think they're going to be better than next year. I think they have a lot more depth than last year. I think I'm excited to see incoming guys like Tobias and Petit. Those guys I think are going to develop bigger roles. I think Zion Stanford, from everything I'm hearing, has had a great offseason to the point that you're like, okay, maybe that is somebody that they can really be excited about going forward. So I would say that's where I'm at right now. That being said, it's also May 29th, and they still have 2 open scholarships. And maybe they bring in some guy that really kind of changes the direction.
Yeah, you guys have hit the nail on the head. 2 more mailbag questions to get to. Another from a longtime listener, Andrew Forgotch on Twitter. Who will be the highest rated / ranked Al when the newest college football game drops? Side note, I'm not against breaking this down even further to speed, strength, or any other attribute you see fit.
I love this question.
I do
Yeah,
too.
it's a
This
great
is
question.
tough. This is tough.
Can I go first?
Yeah.
Please.
I had 2 trains of thought. I thought 1, it's going to be like based upon production from last year. Or 2, is it going to be some guy that was a highly recruited recruit going elsewhere that transfers in the Temple and just kind of gets like a default hire because of their recruiting prowess?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say Dewan Black. I think you're going to go off of a little bit of both. He was a highly recruited guy going to Florida. He had a pretty good debut season at Temple, almost had 10 tackles for a loss. In a true thing, I think he's the right choice. That doesn't actually mean I think he's going to be the best real life football player for Temple, but I think video game wise, he checks the boxes.
Yeah, that's a good answer. I was between him, but the name that immediately came to mind was Antonio Jones.
Yeah.
I think he's a guy whose physical attributes just leap off the page. And he already had a good performance against some pretty good secondaries. I mean, you broke down the film on what he was able to do last year. So I think the one thing that might hurt, injury ratings are a thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that could be something for all of the whole team. But if we're talking just straight like what he might be able to do, I think he could be up there. But that was just a name that came immediately to mind.
My question is like how much like analysis do they put into it? Because back in the day when these games used to come out, like 2008, 2009, it was really based upon like recruiting rankings and stats. So like Antonio Jones, are they going to say like you played at Grambling State, you had no recruiting prowess, here's
That's
a
fair.
68, or are they really going to like break down into it? I don't know. Because if it's Madden, they literally have like full-time employees that go like training camp to training camp, and they're evaluating the rankings every week, the ratings every week. And I feel like for a first game back, they're not going to do that. At least not at the Temple level.
That, and it's just like with the NFL, you have 32 teams too.
Sure.
And it's just like it. Well, I mean, they have had 10 years. They've had 10 years to figure it out. So it's like maybe, but no, that's a valid point.
The Athletic got to like play it for 2 hours as a review, and they were like, "You can't do any of the game modes. Like you can't do it. You can't do Dynasty. Brutal. You can't do this. Like you can review. I don't know the screen. like
nice. Nice. There we go.
Go, Johnny.
I was gonna say if I know EA, they are known to cut corners, and with a game that is to this scale, with this many players, this many teams, all the game modes that they're saying that they want to have, they're gonna cut corners, and I feel like it's gonna be the stats, the attributes, and who they rank as the highest overall players for each team, especially down towards Temple's level. That's where you're gonna see them cut corners, and that's why I think I don't have a specific answer for who I think it could be. I just think it might not be someone that you're not expecting.
Lame.
Come on, give it an answer.
How are you gonna criticize and then not, offer a suggestion?
Throw somebody out there.
Honestly, I feel come back to me. I'm still thinking.
Oh,
with that in mind, if they're gonna go lazy, which I don't disagree, like EA has made a history of going lazy with stuff, right? But like they didn't have like a base here to go lazy off of. Like if this was FIFA 25, this is gonna be copy paste, change 6 things, $70, please. If they're gonna be lazy with this, maybe it's a guy like Wisdom Corshi, where you're just like, I'm looking for an experienced offensive lineman. He has 35 career starts or whatever, 82. Like off we go.
Good answer.
Could be that.
My guess is going to be somebody that you don't expect. Like we could sit here and argue that it's going to be Dewan Black and or it could be Wisdom Corshi or who'd you say?
Antonio Jones.
Antonio Jones. But honestly, I don't think it's going to be somebody we don't expect. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if it's like a special teamer. I don't think anyone on Temple's roster gets above like maybe an 80, right? And like you said, EA is very, very lazy. So it'd be very easy for them to be like, okay, Dante, you get a 70, you get a 77. Dante Egg gets a 77 just because he was okay. And they don't really do too much. They're not going to do too much research when it comes to Temple football.
Look,
but realistically, I would say DeJuan Black. I think he deserves to be the highest rated player on this.
Declan, it also depends when they looked at the rosters. If they looked 2 months ago, they had a 99 running back there. He's just not there anymore.
That's true. Future Heisman winner.
That's hilarious.
Can you win a Heisman from Bloomsburg?
Well, he's going to transfer up to Alabama.
Oh, that's fair.
Yeah.
Last mailbag question here comes from the Twitter handle Big5+1. Where does Temple stand with getting a center from the portal, and where do you think they get a preseason rank within the conference? Where they stand with getting a center from the portal, still at it. I think again they could look internationally. There's time here, like Kyle said, this could shake loose later on in the summer. They know they need size. At this point, I think we've talked about it, they know they need somebody like and when I say this, people aren't going to be excited, but like someone in the mold of an Emmanuel Akpomo, a guy who doesn't put up big numbers, but a guy who's like 6'10" or above, who can come in there and eat up some minutes for you. So I think it's going to be more along the lines of a player like that, unless they get some monster NIL donation and they're able to shake loose. And again, there's not even a ton left out there on the market for the transfer portal market for bigs. But yes, I where do they stand? I think they'll get a big. What type of big? I'm not sure. Again, we'll see. Where do you think they get a preseason rank within the conference? I don't know. I know the players don't give much of a damn about preseason rankings. I don't know that writers do either. But to answer the question, I think that you'll see them get more respect based off of what they did in the conference tournament. I think that you'll see them get more respect based off of the transfers that they brought in the backcourt. So I could see them maybe being in the 5, 6, 7 range. I don't know that they'll be ranked in the top 4 in preseason rankings.
7 was the number that automatically came to mind. So take that for what you will, for all the reasons that you said.
What were they last year? Weren't they like super low last year? Preseason?
They were. I think
11,
12.
12.
Well, if it was 11, that was spot on because that's what they finished in the regular season, right?
Yeah, that is fair.
My thought process was that they're going to be ranked similarly to how the women were last year, and maybe 9, 8, 7, maybe even 10 to, I don't think it'll be 10, but I definitely do think they'll be top 10, but like not 10, but somewhere in that 7, 8, 9 range.
I will push back because I think the only difference between the women last year and the men this year is the men made a conference title run.
That's true.
That was a famous rap lyric that Ramir just said. Top 10, not 10. Yeah, that's what people say. That's what they say when they're talking.
Maybe just a little off, but yeah.
I agree. I would say 5, 6, 7, 8, that range. And I think that's fair. Like, I mean, I think they didn't go out and add LeBron, right? Like they added guys that are like you're hopeful and you think they're going to fit into the system well and you hope they have the right momentum, but they didn't add some surefire first team All-American that you go, okay, this is a top 2 team. I think 5, 6, 7, 8, that mid-tier, which is a lot better than 11, 12, 13, 14.
I agree. Temple was ranked 12th, by the way, coming into last season. But I'd say for all the same reason you guys said, I'd say maybe 8. I think 8's a safe number.
Well, Declan, it's your time to shine.
Yep. It's bracket time. It's time for that summertime madness is what I'm
How long
hearing.
can we play the song before we get demonetized?
3 seconds.
Did you ask Andrew? You should have asked Andrew.
Did Johnny type out the lyrics to this?
He did.
Thank you so much, Johnny. Way to speak up,
But I changed the sadness to an M for madness.
Did you do it for each one? Did you like a find replace that you?
That's exactly what I did. And I was gonna do all of the lyrics, but then I got a pop up on Zoom saying that that it was too long.
Who hearted it in the chat?
I did. I heard it. I heard it twice. No, only once.
So that's my contribution. Instead of singing it, I put the chorus in.
Still love for you to sing it, Johnny.
Not going to happen.
Yeah, your contribution to our audio podcast was typing it on the screen for us to read and no one else.
Yeah, pretty much.
Perfect transition. Thank you so much. I've got the bracket here in front of me. We've got 34 food places. So thank you to everybody that put something in on the message boards on Twitter, however you sent them in. We've got quite the matchup. We've got some significant matchups here in the first round. We'll go region by region, taking the feedback that we got last week on air instead of in the group chat. We're not going to rehash that issue. I have renamed the regions, and we're going one by one here. Please feel free to comment after I list all of the regions, please. Okay.
You're like the hold the applause guy.
100%. Okay. I'm going to go through it and then you can chime in. Okay. During the designated chime in period. So we'll start with the Joe Klecko region. In the number 1 overall seed, like for the tournament, the number one Orient Express will be facing the winner of the play-in matchup, White Truck versus, and this may shock some people, but quite frankly, I think this is the right place for it, McDonald's. Then in our 2-7 matchup, we've got the number 2 seed Richie's, not Richie's Cafe, Richie's the Wall Richie's, versus number 7 Fames, which quite frankly should be in the play-in, but that's just me. We've got the number 3 seed Footlong Truck taking on the number 6 seed Nochery. And finally, we've got the number 4 seed Burger Tank taking on what could be a dark horse candidate here, the number 5 seed Raising Cane's. Now's your time to comment if you have any comments on matchups, whatever you want to add in there.
The people at the Nochery, at the now defunct Nochery, are upset that you called them the Nochery.
Well, my apologies. Where'd your place go?
They should be around to defend themselves.
Yeah, where'd your place go?
Yeah.
Sorry. And that's going to play in, I think, for a lot of teams here.
Wait, Orient Express is the number 1 overall seed in the
The
tournament.
number one seed.
Wow.
That's what shocked me more than anything, that they're the number 1.
Well, so let's, I should have started with this. So how we determine the seeding, the committee ranked choice voted every team that you're about to hear, and only 2 people got back in time, including me. So it was John
You
and
guys
my
suck.
rankings. Johnny, who decided to submit it right before the podcast.
Hey,
When was I going to have time to put yours in? Okay.
hey, I did my rankings though.
That's great. Not nearly in time.
Fair.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So it is
got mine
just
to you
John
last
and my
night.
rankings.
Sorry.
Before we ordered food last night, I said, I got to get these done.
Yeah, and I appreciate you doing that because it would have
Wow.
just been me, and that would have been awkward.
Look,
But everybody had the opportunity to do it.
well, I went to 10:15 last night.
I'm
I thought in
sorry.
my mind,
I
do I go
forgot.
to bed or do I do Declan's little rankings? And I chose bed. And I think that's fair.
In all fairness, I made the same choice. I made this bracket this morning, but yours still wasn't in. 11 o'clock, nothing.
That's
Declan,
on me.
He called them your little rankings. How does that make you feel?
Well, it wasn't his rankings. I'll tell you what.
There we go. I said from the beginning, this is a you thing, and I fully support it. I'm
Thank
letting you
so
fly.
much.
I'm letting you
didn't
spread your wings
support
and fly.
it. you
I'm letting
quite
you
literally
spread your
did not
wings.
support it.
Spread your wings and fly away. I will be the wind beneath your wings.
You know what? Did you ever know that you're my hero, Kyle?
Yeah, there you go. Look at that. Declan gets all my little references. Johnny just smiles and nods.
Great song.
Johnny has a great Bette Midler story.
What?
Exactly.
Yeah.
When I released my side quest, a documentary about me sending both of you to improv school, this is going to be great. John and Johnny take on Second City.
I look forward to it.
Anyway, moving on to the John Chaney region, we've got the second number 1 seed. And this, you know what?
Does this
quite
mean that
frankly-
you put John Chaney below Joe Klecko?
No, this was just I went in order of when I thought of them. So
So subconsciously, the answer to
No,
my question is
absolutely not.
yes. Because you
absolutely
thought
not.
Joe Klecko first.
These are 4 Temple legends. In no way does it matter the way in which I mentioned them. It's just the fact that we had them because we wanted to honor them. So, so in the John Chaney region, the number 1 seed, so number 1 seed, Maxie's will face the winner of Temple Rainbow versus Hanks. which will be an interesting matchup. We've got the number 2 seed Pub Web facing the number 7 hungry underdog Philly style. We've got the number 3 seed Honey Truck facing just a juggernaut, a stalwart, the number 6 seed Johnson and Hardwick Dining Hall. And we've got the number 4 seed Azteca facing the number 5 seed Owl's Nest.
I'm just going to say it. I disagree with the committee putting both the two biggest bars in the same bracket.
It was just how the numbers shook out. And
From
that's the luck of the
from your
draw.
data points of 2.
Yep. It could have been the data point of 3, Kyle. That's all I'm saying. Again, this is 2 years in a row the committee has failed me, and left me out to dry. And that's okay. I'm willing to do it.
I think
stand on the hill.
I think J&H as a 6 seed is an underdog. What the hell is it still doing this? Because I think so many people are going to have memories there. So many people are nostalgia is going to factor into this. And I think people are going to be nostalgic about the way the J&H was in the 70s, 80s, 90s.
Yeah, see, that's my biggest issue is that my memories of J&H are not that fond.
Yeah.
Like, it was fine,
You know who votes, Declan? Old people vote. That's the whole thing.
That's a very spot-on political commentary,
Yeah.
Kyle. I really appreciate that.
So I'm just saying, I'm going to vote J&H higher than you. You probably do.
Mhm.
That's fair. That's totally valid. So moving on to our next region, the Candace Dupree region. This, I think, is going to be a controversial region. Tennessee State head coach and Temple legend, Candace Dupree.
Who's the football coach at Tennessee State?
Dude, no idea.
He's a running back from Abington High School.
We're number 27. Big
Anybody?
time running back.
Eddie George.
Oh, there you go. Did not know that. This, like I mentioned, this region going to be controversial. I think we could have either a lot of upsets or just a lot of top heavy. There's one underdog in this that I think might take it all the way, just purely off of who's voting. So keep that in mind as we start with the number 1 seed, Eddie's, which well-deserved number 1 seed.
Yes.
Going up against the number 8 seed, Good Food Bus.
What?
The Good Food Bus.
That's the first time I've heard of that.
Really? Because we talked about it last week on the
Really?
podcast. Yeah, we did.
I must have tuned out.
Yep. Thank you for listening. We've got the number 2 seed Ties going up against the number 7 seed Student Center Taco Bell. That's going to be a matchup to watch. Then we've got the number 3 seed Richie's Cafe up against the number 6 seed Chick-fil-A. And finally, we have the number 4 seed Crepe Truck up against the number 5 seed Bagel Shop.
Kyle, go ahead. You have thoughts.
Yeah, I can tell what John voted for. Based upon these rankings, it's pretty obvious where John took negative stances.
100%. I had Taco Bell, I think, the number 3.
Right. So then John probably imagining some terrible experience he had in 2006 where he had to run to the closest bathroom, which was down 2 flights of stairs, is going to negatively impact it. Me, I was created at that sack Taco Bell. So if I was in this, they're not an underdog. They're like a sneaky 2 seed if my number 1 overall seed in this was factored in. So that's on me. It's on me. My guy's got to go out. My guy's got to go out there and earn the wins on the road.
Elections have consequences, Kyle. You should have voted.
I do think Taco Bell is upsetting.
In the state that I live in, felons are not allowed to vote. So
I will mention there were 34 teams that we could have voted on if you had voted. I had Taco Bell as the 16th, which would have been a 4 seed, which I think is fair considering it's not here, but it's Taco Bell. John had it the 31st overall team, which would have been a play-in team.
Insane.
Yeah. So keep that in mind.
Who hurt you there, John?
Nobody. It's just
what hurt you there?
Lost some points because it's a chain.
This man.
I honestly thought John was in our group chat when you guys sent that Maggiano's photo. I was like, he's gonna go on some stupid rant about how with all the good Italian restaurants in the tri-state area, you choose to go to Maggiano's and blah blah blah.
I was kind of hoping for that to be.
I was like, he's just poking the bear.
That was purely for reaction.
And on to our Taco Bell never hurt me. The airport Chickies and Pete's hurt me.
Good thing that's not on the bracket, John.
I know.
Temple staple chickies and peas.
In Terminal D, like
And finally,
Moving on.
in the Mark Macon region, we've got the final number 1 seed, just squeaked by Masters, taking on the number 8 seed Champs. Hold your comments for the end, because I probably agree with you. We've got the number 2 seed, and we couldn't figure out the actual name for it, but it's the place with the Chinese food and donuts. One of our users on our message board, I forget who, but thank you for your input, said John and Kate's. That's what I have it in here as.
I don't think D-Blaze 75 was referring to. I think he just was mentioning a place called John and Kate's. I don't think he was saying that the Chinese.
No, he replied directly to your message.
I don't think he did.
Yeah, I saw it.
I think he did.
Yeah, I made a note of it last week. That's the only reason I say that.
All right.
But we could just call it John and Kate's. We can call it Chinese food donut place, whatever you want. It's the Chinese food and donut place as the number 2 seed.
I just brought up my phone to try to Google it, and the last thing I was looking at on my phone was Jeffrey Dahmer. So I don't know if that's
That's crazy. I don't even have my glasses on today. That's completely random. Anyway, the number 2 seed, the Chinese food and donut place to be named later, versus the number 7 seed Crown Fried Chicken. The number 3 seed Mexican Grill Stand versus the number 6 seed Owl Breakfast and Lunch. And the number 4 seed Bagel Hut versus the number 5 seed Temple Star.
That's it. That's all of the ones. So that's the final one.
Yep.
Where were the halal trucks?
We couldn't see there was a lot of controversy around that because we couldn't figure out which ones to include, which ones not to include.
All of them. They're one entity. The halal truck. And like part of me is not really joking about that. Part of me is not really joking about that because when I did some digging into the halal trucks at the health science campus, they all get their crap from the same place. So they just buy this stuff in bulk.
Oh, really?
They keep it in like a warehouse or fish town, and they come and they do their own mixtures from this, but they go in on a lot of combinations. So I'm officially everything here is under protest because halal trucks didn't even make the top 37 or whatever. 2, how the hell is Masters a 1 seed? Declan, have you been to Masters?
John and Masters.
So statistically, how did it become
like 12?
Statistically, how did it become a 1 seed?
Let me go back and look at it.
John
like
had
mathematically, if
overall.
there's 2 people that voted, how the hell did that become a 1 seed?
Yeah, I thought that
if you had them at 12,
I voted high for them, but how did Declan like?
If you had them at 12, there's no scenario where they're
I had it at
top
10. John had it at 1. I had it at 10.
How did you have them at 10? You've never even been there.
Because we mentioned in previous episodes, if you make a good argument, I'm going to put it high. The guy that owned the place won like 2 or 3.
So you had them at 10. What did John have them at?
1.
You had them as the number 1 overall seed, John?
I thought I had.
No, you had it at 1. I have the document right here. You want to see it? I have it.
Really?
I'm looking at it, John. You had them at 1 in Orient.
I also had to cut a bunch of your places because you just started making things up that weren't on the list.
We didn't include like the sexy green truck. We didn't include Salad Alley.
Right. You also put the smoothie truck on there, so I got rid of it because that wasn't on the list. It just saves room for another tournament down the line.
This is like a top 5 worst day of my life. This
You know
whole
what could have prevented this?
I've lost again, and like it's a big year, and I've lost faith in democracy. Like I've lost faith in democracy because of this presidency.
You know what's crazy? You could have voted. Imagine that.
I don't think I had much runway. Didn't you only give us like 2 days notice?
Yeah, 2 days notice.
Yeah, I got a lot of things.
You could have voted.
Well, balls in the air. All right,
I also sent this list to you last week.
I'm also going to influence this election. I just want that to be known.
Well, that's
like I'm just Russian bots on Twitter. I'm going to try to manipulate the people into getting what I want.
Well, we haven't established the voting system yet, so I think we should do that now because, we're coming up against it now. I think we'll vote next week, but I think we got to decide the weight of each vote because, realistically, Johnny, you're not going to be here.
Yeah.
Well, we got to account for that, in our voting.
All right, so how are we doing the vote? Are we doing the Twitter vote like we did with the all-time draft thing?
Yeah, I won that one too. So anything that I can manipulate,
yes,
please.
Kyle,
I know Well, we've talked in previous episodes about including the popular vote, which I do agree we should. But I also think our voices should factor here. So we got to decide, which is more important, because we got to have a deciding vote at some point.
So we're thinking next week is like between today and when we record next week, the voting for round 1 has happened.
Yes. At least the popular vote part of it.
I think popular vote should happen. We do the first round. Popular vote happens. We as a unit get to argue why John's opinions suck next week, and then we vote on it and we factor it. And I still think that there are 5 of us, assuming there are 5 of us, we cannot tie in a one-on-one situation. There is going to be a winner. I think it should be. I want to no, because I don't want to discount the popular vote entirely.
Yeah,
we could do like a, we approve.
But what happens when we don't approve the popular vote?
Yeah, I think we need a 4-1 to overturn the popular vote, or a 3-1.
Or we just do that. Hey, look, we all represent 10%, but then it just requires one of us to agree with the popular vote, and the popular vote wins.
Yeah, exactly.
This is the whole thing. We probably should hash this out off air. Should have had to figure it out.
It's a great idea. I wish somebody had thought
I wish somebody had given us like 3 days notice.
I wish somebody had asked this last week.
I don't know if I'm being targeted with this, or if this is John. Like, I don't know if you've seen the org chart. Snake rots or fish rots from the head down, right? So like John's the head of the fish.
Sure.
We're just the rotting out.
The whole time that this is Declan's time to shine. This is his thing.
I gave my opinion. I think that's what we should do. I'm opening it up because last week I'm becoming a dictator. So last week that was what the conversation was. I don't want to do that. I've expressed I don't want to do that. So I'm opening it up. Open forum here. Johnny, feel free to talk at any point. We would love to have your opinion on this subject.
I personally believe I'm with you, Declan, in the fact that I trust you. I don't believe you're a dictator, and I think that
You sound like you're reading off a cue card and you're getting money for this.
Here's what I want.
I believe you, Declan.
In order to land this plane,
I don't believe you're a dictator.
In order to land this plane, regardless, between today and next week, popular vote should happen.
Yes.
I want on my desk EOD.
That's end of day, Johnny.
Friday, EOD Friday. Proposals on how you would break up our votes. Like, is it 5-0? Does that get a higher thing, or is it just like a set percentage? And then we will decide before the time we record next week what we represent.
Wonderful.
Do you have the bandwidth? Do you have the bandwidth to take that on?
I hope so. I will write out what I just told you.
Because I want, if you need to run it up the flagpole, if you need more synergy, just let us know. But otherwise, we'll circle back.
Make sure you give Kyle 3 days notice instead of 2.
Can somebody identify all the key work cliches that Kyle used? I heard
there are too many.
Have the bandwidth is a huge one. I hate it. I get it so much, but I have it often.
You didn't even call me a rock star, which I'm offended by.
Heavy hitter is the new rock star. At least in my industry. Oh, he's a real heavy hitter. Go F yourself.
Synergy.
Synergy. Run up the flagpole, circle back.
We should be curious about this.
Oh, I haven't gotten that one. We should be curious about this. Interesting. Yeah.
So pass along. The food bracket.
Pass along.
Are people voting solely on Twitter, or are they voting on Instagram?
Good question.
Yeah, I think we'll link everything on the message boards, but it'll all be on Twitter. So go follow us over there at OwlScoop_com. If you're not already, what are you doing? But we're going to go vote on there. I'll have all the links to every tweet. You can go and find those links. You can go vote for everything. That's how you participate in this democracy. So go vote, hit the polls. They'll probably come out. I think we'll do the play-in as soon as the episode.
Stay in line.
Jesus.
Okay. I think we'll do the play-in as soon as the episode drops, and then we'll release the full bracket later this week. My brother is graduating on Friday, so it might take me a little bit, but it'll be out by Saturday.
You're not graduating. You already graduated.
Well, yeah, but I gotta celebrate with him. It's a big deal.
What's the Landis family like graduation celebration?
It depends on the person. We usually like an at-home kind of get it catered gig though. and small, not a big party, just
Get
a
it
small.
catered. Ooh, la-dee-da.
Well, I mean, by catered, I mean we order food ahead of time and then we bring it in. And
You know where I
that's-
went for my high school graduation?
Where'd you go?
On the border. Just went to a little
On
Mexican
95?
chain restaurant.
That's a great pick.
Not
Oh, that's
95.
south.
It's
That's
on,
south of the border.
That's on the border. It's in Main Street on Next.
There
And I
you go.
just sat there and like this 2007, and I just like tapped my fingers, waiting for my laptop to be given to me. Like I know you got me a laptop. You know you got me a laptop. Give me the laptop.
There you go. I honestly don't remember what we did for mine, but I'm sure it was fun. So that was the food bracket. Go vote. It'll be on the message boards. It'll be on Twitter. Thank you for your participation. We appreciate your participation in advance. It's going to be a fun time.
We both love and respect John's opinion about things. We're sorry if we.
Hey, at least he put his opinion in. You
We're
know,
sorry
that's
if we
what
made him
needed.
upset.
Don't fire us, please.
Happy anniversary. Chelsea, you're welcome. Enjoy your gift.
Tell Chelsea I say, hey.
I'll encourage her to vote too.
We know Declan tried hard, and maybe we should have supported him more.
Maybe.
And this is going to get some negative engagement.
That's fine.
The seating is going to get negative attention.
Look, negative engagement is engagement. You know, I welcome all listeners. We love it.
I think as you'll grow in life, you'll realize there is such a thing as negative engagement, as bad,
Oh, yeah.
bad engagements.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, there definitely is.
So,
But I think for this is not a negative engagement. I think this is, this is good. Get people talking about something that brings people together, and that's food. And we're just trying to find where the best place is,
we're genuinely curious. We don't know. We're just walking around.
Yeah.
Where should I eat?
Hey guys.
Only had a bracket to tell me.
And the list too, Go down the list. First place doesn't work for you, try second place.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Maybe they'll go all the way down to 15, 20, but first 10.
And maybe they won't be there, and that's tough. But that's why we got 34.
Yeah, our number one overall seed in some people's thing closed years ago.
Declan, where was Canes in the bracket again?
Off the top of my head, I think it was 5.
I think they were a 5 seed, 5 or 6.
Not to expose. I need more variety. I need more variety for a 5 seed. Can't all just be
5 seed.
one on. Yeah, one. You're offering me one thing.
Well, it's that darn good that I think it supersedes that. But you're definitely right. I think that's why it's not higher.
And what was the note that I included on McDonald's?
You included notes?
Yeah. So he wrote for his number 34 overall out of like 39 or whatever he ended up doing. McDonald's in parentheses.
I detect the tone.
Well, I'm just saying. 34 McDonald's in parentheses. Kyle and I filed our Steve Adazio stories from there the day he was hired. Should have been a sign of things to come.
That was back when it was harder to get access to the internet in 2011. It really was, and just that was a place we could sit down. I think we got Wi-Fi from McDonald's and filed.
Yeah,
there you go.
Now
Hey, nothing wrong with that. We filed from
phone.
Taco Bell.
Hey, you just go on your phone, boop boop boop.
Wawa parking lots.
We filed from Wawa parking lots. I get it. That was our Kiyomi McMiller breaking news. We did in a Wawa parking lot in the middle of New Jersey. It was like top 7 and then like the date and time of her announcement, which she had never told. So,
all right.
No big deal.
So subscribe to OwlScoop.com. We have more interviews coming along with the Get to Know the Owls series. Go to Twitter, go vote.
Or go to the message boards. Either way.
Message boards. We'll have more for you on the Summertime Madness.
Nailed it.
There we go. Redemption arc.
Good bracket. And anything else that comes up along the way. So thanks for sticking with us for another episode. We'll talk to you guys soon.